life of our podcast to just start not giving a shit. Not that I don't, just that I'm curious. You sometimes get to that point with things where it's like, I'm just going to show up and do this. And if it's great, it's great. And if it's not, whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I at least am excited.
I'm excited too. Don't get me wrong. It was a random thought that crossed my head is like, at some point, like, do you get to the point where it's just like, well, it's just like a job. I got to show up and I got to do it. I love talking to you, man. I love doing this. I love the excuse to have a beer because, like, if we don't do this, I literally don't drink. So having a beer or two of an evening, especially as tonight is my Friday night, it's really pleasant.
Ooh. What are you drinking now?
I now have a from our local Whitewater brewery, Whitewater. If anyone is watching from Whitewater, we are completely and utterly open to sponsorships.
It's true.
A raspberry light lager, which is bright and fruity according to the label, and actually does taste a little bit like raspberries.
Very nice.
Nice.
Sounds tasty. Boring. Summersby apple. Tastes like apples.
Well, it's mostly made from apples, so one would hope so. Have you given any thought to trying something new like Bone Shaker?
I told you about my experience with Bone Shaker,
And then I
didn't
showed
I?
up with it one day. I don't think I did, or I don't think you did. I do remember that you don't like it, and
Oh,
I
God.
agree with you. It's bad.
We had it Fridays usually at the office back in the day, pre-pandemic. We would shut down early and crack a few brews. We'd get, some ping pong going, just kind of chill and wind down the week. And often that would involve just some miscellaneous crafts or whatever getting picked up, and we'd all try them out. And I'm not an IPA guy to begin with. Like, I'm not a big beer drinker to begin with, but in the spectrum of available beers to drink, IPAs would be on the end of the spectrum that I do not like. And I think it probably has to do with, I don't know, they say there's two types of people in the world, like in how you taste, like those that like cilantro and those that don't.
Mm,
I hate cilantro.
I love cilantro.
And there are a lot of things like cilantro that just, it's like dish soap. Just Well, Bone Shaker was like pine tar dish soap if you lit it on fire.
Ah, ah.
Like, imagine the flaming Homer, right?
Mhm.
But pine sol, flame. That's what it was like. It was
Well,
just awful.
speaking as someone who loves cilantro and quite enjoys IPAs, Bone Shaker is bad. It is very much a beer that they got to the end of it and went, "This is really bad. We better throw some hops in here and tell people it's an IPA." Anyway, enough bashing. There
What?
are there are good beers out there.
You
Homer
expect
had one.
positivity on one
Well,
of our shows?
I would like to. I mean, I've been trying to inject some positivity. It's a struggle for
Okay.
me, but um,
Why don't
you
we
know,
talk about the best movie ever made?
okay.
I am, of course, talking about 1987's The Princess Bride.
It's a fantastic movie.
I didn't think that was a hot take. The Princess Bride has become my test. So much so that, like, when I have friends that are going on like dates and they're meeting girls, like, my suggested test is watch The Princess Bride. If she doesn't like it, or if he doesn't like it, get rid of him. I did just a cursory search online, and this was a mistake.
Uh-oh.
Just looking for what people's opinions were on The Princess Bride now. And let me tell you, nothing has convinced me more that I belong to a completely different species than a significant part of our population.
Oh, than
Now,
the internet, at least.
oh my. Listen, you don't have to love The Princess Bride, but it's one of those movies that should be almost impossible to hate.
I agree. It suffers from the same problem as a lot of really classic movies, though, where it was made in a different time, it was made to a different template, it runs at a different rhythm.
Mhm.
So if you grew up watching, oh, what's his face with all the explosions? He did the Transformers movie.
Michael Bay.
Michael Bay. If you grew up watching Michael Bay movies, The Princess Bride is going to feel like an alien wrote it, because it's slow, right? There's lots of bits of subtle dialogue. There's times when it seems like nothing is happening, because that is what happened with movies in those days, right? You didn't have CGI. Everything that you did, someone had to do. So people basically walked and talked, and that was the movie. I will say though that the sword fight in the middle of it is the sword fight of all movie sword fights. I don't care.
Mhm.
I will die on that hill. That is the greatest sword fight that has ever been committed to film.
So, what is The Princess Bride to you? I
Okay.
assume you must love it because every reference I've thrown into everything that I've done here, you've gushed over.
Okay, well, let me put it like this. For our 20th wedding, or sorry, 10th wedding anniversary, we we renewed our vows in a Princess Bride themed ceremony. Everyone was required to come dressed as a pirate, except for our one nephew, who is a really good sport and came dressed as a pilot, which some people got and some people didn't, but I thought was hilarious. Right?
Did you have a guy do the thing?
Yes,
Marriage.
yes, we did. Yes, indeed, we did. Uh,
Marriage is what brings us together
Today.
today.
Yes, we did. He came out dressed with the hat and the whole deal.
That is
Um,
amazing.
yep, I dressed as the Dread Pirate Roberts, and Cindy got dressed up so that you literally wouldn't recognize her. The sign-in book when you come in and everybody signs the book, it was literally the Princess Bride. It was pick a page and write something down. So, and we still have it. It's on our, well, it's in a box right now because we said we haven't unpacked. But yeah, I first saw the Princess Bride probably in '88 or '89. It was still playing on one of the movie channels. I was staying with my grandparents, and this was back before you had like a TV guide on the TV. And I was
Mhm.
flipping around to see if there was something to watch one afternoon, and I literally tuned into to the movie as they were starting the sword fight at the top of the Cliffs of Insanity. And I'm like, "What is this? This is so awesome!" And I had no idea what it was. I watched the whole movie, and of course, like I'm looking at the TV guide, going, "I don't know which show this is. Like I don't know what it is." And then I managed to catch sort of other bits and pieces of it throughout the next week or so while I was there, and didn't know what it was. I didn't discover that it was The Princess Bride until, oh golly, I was in my mid-teens, late teens, so like mid 90s.
Mhm.
And since then, it's my favorite movie, right? As much as I love many other movies, this one always, it has a special place in my heart because it literally has everything. It has pirates, giants, sword fights, has true love, betrayal. Yeah,
Is this a kissing movie?
it's definitely a kissing movie. It has Fred Savage and Columbo, and they're playing baseball. The baseball game that he plays at the beginning of the movie, um, is a baseball game that I sunk many hours into.
Do 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 do.
Yep.
Woo!
Screwball. I forget what it's called. I think it was called Fastball or Major League Baseball. It might have been one of those ones that was released under a bunch of different titles.
Yeah, because I think it was released on the Amiga as one thing, and then it got a port on something else as something else. But
I
don't
played
quote
it
me
on
on
the
that.
I played it on the Commodore 64, so it's at least that old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw The Princess Bride until a little bit later now. I'm a little bit younger than you, not too much younger than you, but it was probably 92-ish when I saw it, and it was rented from a movie store. I didn't have friends that had heard about it. I didn't know it existed. And this is one of the very first things where I took internet advice. I was on a message board for something or some others, and there was some topics, movies came up, and it was The Princess Bride. Like, well, that doesn't sound like something I would watch.
It really
And
doesn't.
that's the number one thing about this movie. It's meta before like meta existed in movies. Now meta's always existed, so it's a little tongue in cheek, but like, a lot of movies are meta now, and this movie had a great sort of framing device to turn a lot of that stuff just into part of the movie in a way that you could accept, like making fun of a lot of fantasy tropes and a lot of whatnot in a way that didn't feel like parody though, right? Like the
Yeah.
difference between this and a Mel Brooks movie is that a Mel Brooks movie always feels like parody. This felt like a love story about a love story, but a love story to a bunch of different types of literature and some older movies, the kind of stuff that really wouldn't hold up today. Um, this thing sort of played off some of those tropes in a way that at the time was easy to digest, even for somebody who wouldn't have been interested in that type of stuff, like a love story, the
They
11
framed
year
it
old, 12-year old
around
me.
Yeah, they framed it around the way that it was told to Fred Savage as a story really well, which is something that translated from the book really well.
Mhm.
Uh,
Now, this movie is based off a book, not entirely faithful. They made a lot of changes that I think probably had to be made for the movie. And
yeah,
listen, I'm not complaining about the movie. We're actually going to read the book because it's been about 23 years maybe since I've read the book.
been at least 10 for me.
And that'll probably be our next book project. Probably get to that in a month or so. Um, I went through a phase that this movie is probably responsible for, where I watched a lot of the Mel Brooks stuff, like when I was really too young to understand the
You were just with
satire.
this out.
Yeah, the satire and the real meta stuff, where I just enjoyed the obvious, almost slapsticky comedy, but the intelligent slapsticky comedy, because I'm not normally a slapstick guy. Movies like Airplane and um, hell, even some of the real shit like Police Academy and stuff like that. Like I went through a
Oh, Police Academy is such a guilty pleasure for me. It's so
yeah,
terrible, and I love it so much.
but most of those movies I probably loved because of this movie. You
Hmm.
know, Robin Hood Men in Tights is not a great movie, like even by Mel Brooks standards. Like it's
No,
low hanging fruit. Like it's not smart in the way that a lot of Mel Brooks movies are smart. But I still put it up in my list of top, I don't know, 20 or 30 comedy movies for me because of the obvious relationship it has to this movie. Obviously, you're dealing with the main actor, Carrie Elwes, playing the lead in both parts. And there's a lot of DNA that's sort of shared between them. It isn't subtle, like it isn't a beautiful movie like this one is. If you haven't seen The Princess Bride, there's a few things I guess you should understand right away. It's a low budget movie. Like by 1987 standards, I don't know what the actual budget is, and maybe it isn't all that low, but
Not super low, but
It's
it wasn't high.
it wasn't high. There's not, like you alluded to, a single explosion in this movie. There's no action
Oh,
really
wait,
aside from the
that's not
best
true.
sword fight ever.
They're in the
Oh,
swamp.
yes. Sort
Um,
of.
they're pyrotechnics, not really explosions.
You got the flamey things and you've got the
The rodents of unusual size.
yeah. Was there a small bang uh as part of Fezzik going up with the Holocaust cloak on?
No, but there was fire. I think they actually lit
Yeah.
him on fire.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if there was a, maybe there was in the book or something. Like it's been a long time for the book. But yeah, no traditional explosions.
No
No
car chases.
traditional car chases, no traditional, like it's not, it does have the best sword fight in history. And it's interesting because not only is it like a really great sword fight, but it actually provides you with, even if it's all wrong, I've never fact checked all of this, but it references like traditional fencing styles and schools and stuff through it.
I
Like all of those things that they're talking about, right? Like Tybalt and Capoferro and all of that are actual things. They're real,
yeah,
you know.
probably not what they were doing, but
No,
yeah,
probably not.
but still, yeah. I mean, it was like there's a little bit of silliness injected into the middle of it because it's what, like a 10 or 12 minute scene of them whacking at each other with swords.
Yeah.
Um, Carrie Elwes on a broken ankle.
Yeah. But the rest of the action in the movie is like comical. Now, some of it is intentionally comical, like a scene where he's fighting Andre the Giant and he's
Yes.
basically just hanging off of him while they're exchanging dialogue. After that, like probably the most action occurs when they're climbing a rope up the cliffs of insanity. Like that's
Yeah.
it.
There's not much. Well, when what's her name is in the water with the shrieking eels, I suppose is action-y. But I mean, like the effects are like Jim Henson level,
Yeah.
which is still good, but it's very much like you're not like, ooh, this looks real. It's like it's obviously a puppet or a guy in a suit. Um, like it's not.
It's not too many steps above like a stage play translated to film
Yeah,
in terms of like the quality of the prop work and stuff. And none of it matters.
but
Like
it
that's part of the
suits.
charm. Oh,
Yeah, it
absolutely.
suits.
You know, the framing device in the movie and the book is that you've got Columbo telling a story, reading a book to Fred Savage. So right away, everything that's happening, the characters that are a little bit silly and cartoonish, it's fine because they're not real characters. In the movie, they're not real characters.
Yeah, someone's reading about them in a book.
And the fact that they break out of the story to come back to Peter Falk and Fred Savage occasionally reminds you of the fact that, oh, this is fantasy. Like I'm not supposed to
Yeah, this is not. We don't need buy-in here.
right.
The other thing that's really good, and it's actually framed really well in the book as well, is that like they'll cut back to Peter Falk reading the book, and he'll go, "We're going to skip over that, we're going to skip that, and we're going to skip that, and we're going to skip," because he's literally just reading the fun parts,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, it's funny because when I first realized what was happening there, it struck home to me because I actually do that. Like when I went back and reread, for example, the Lord of the Rings, at about that age, like I would skip over Frodo's bits because they didn't excite me. Like I'm not interested in this. I want to read about like like the Gimli and Legolas fighting the things, and I want to read about Aragorn beating on people with a sword because that's what I was interested in. And Frodo's basically just going for a really long and quite awkward walk. Right, which I now realize is like the central theme of the book. It's sort of important that you pay attention to those things, but like if I was reading it now, I read the whole thing, but like I would skip over the boring parts,
Mhm.
right? And that's something that it's totally okay to do. It was nice to see that outside of myself.
It is cast perfectly.
Yes.
And at the time that this came out, like, I don't think really many of these actors were well-known actors. Chris Sarandon, maybe.
Yeah,
Uh,
Christopher and Mandy Patinkin had done a couple of things. I think at
yeah.
that point he was well known in some circles.
Uh, Carrie Elwes was relatively new. Robin Wright, I don't know that she was in much before this.
This was her first movie,
And
and she is, based on that performance
you
alone,
know,
a rare talent.
Wallace Shawn, who's basically
Oh yeah, he's a
and
treasure.
Andre the Giant, like, everybody's favorite character
Yep.
in this movie, played by the original wrestler translated to stage. I think I imagine there's some that did it before him, but not in anything that anybody really loved.
My favorite thing about, because I have Carrie Elwes' book, and I've read it, and it's, I mean, it's written as simply as you can possibly write such a thing. But my favorite thing about the stories of Andre the Giant is just like he would go into town and order like a 24 pack of bottles of wine, and he would drink them, right? And his body mass was such that he could literally drink 24 bottles of wine and still stumble out sometimes. And occasionally he would pass out in the doorway leaving the bar, and that's it. The bar's closed. It's not like we're moving him. Like we gotta let him sleep it off and nobody can get in or out. Ah,
So here's what I think is interesting about this movie. It would never, ever get made today.
might get you made on YouTube. Might.
Quite literally. I'll bring that up later. But yeah, it is something that is just, I don't know if I talked about this before, but it's fascinating. Modern entertainment, TV shows and movies, the cost of making them. You have to
Astronomical.
be able to sell the idea, right? And that's one of the big reasons why everything was a sequel or a prequel or an adaptation of an own IP that's popular. Because in order to warrant any level of financial risk, even for what would be a low-ish to medium budget movie, you got to convince a lot of people to spend a lot of money. So you play it safe. We're going to make, Avengers 17, or we're
It'll
going to make,
sell.
hey, what's that franchise from a video game that hasn't been adapted yet that some people like? Let's do that.
Or hey, here's this one that did really well 20 years ago. Let's make that one again.
Like literally again.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
well, when you think about it, like what's a small budget movie these days? Like $100 million, right? Like yeah, inflation is a thing, and $100 million isn't what $100 million used to be, but it's still a lot of money,
Hmm.
right? And there's lots of movies that you spend $100 million and take a risk, and it makes 50 million at the box office, and now you're out $50 million, and
Yeah.
that's folding money.
And I have to think that when they made this movie back in the day, like they didn't expect it to do well at the box office.
I don't know if they do or not. I do remember reading stories about William Golding, who's the guy who wrote both the book and the screenplay. He had real trouble actually getting this movie going, right? Like it would, even back then it would have been a difficult sell, because it sounds like a sort of children's romantic comedy,
Hmm.
right? And how do you market that? The other thing that's really interesting is I have it on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever it was when we bought it, and it has, as its special feature, the original theatrical trailer. And I guarantee you, if you show that theatrical trailer to audiences today, it wouldn't even register.
Yeah.
It's not punchy. It doesn't have any jokes. It doesn't hit the right beats. It's literally just some snippets of the movie and a general description of what it's about,
Hmm.
and it feels boring.
And we're talking, post Star Wars, post Jaws, post the Indiana Jones first couple of movies. So the idea of the summer blockbuster had already arrived by the time this was made in '87. And I mean, we watch a lot of best of the worst. Really, the combination of the cover art for this and that trailer, like it feels like something like Ice Pirates or one of those movies that's like, let's knock
Yeah.
something off and hope that, the hype for Star Wars, somebody will see this if we bring it out a week before Star Wars or whatever.
Or let's hope that this makes it big in the home video market afterwards as
But
people sort of catch on.
but this very much wasn't that, because usually those are cash grabs, right? Like everybody phones it in. They throw something together. The craft and passion that went into this movie. Now I know it's easy to look back because of I would say a bit more than a cult following that this movie developed. Like
Oh,
it isn't a typical cult movie, but
it's a lovable movie.
it is. And but you can tell that like everybody that participated in making this movie, those that are still alive today,
They
still
did a
reminisce
reunion.
about this movie fondly.
Yeah, they did a reunion, and actually some of the clips of the interviews from that are really really interesting. One of the things that comes up, you say that the people in the movie weren't really all that well known. I mean, Billy Crystal was in it.
As a
It's a
yeah,
bit part.
yeah.
It's almost like a cameo, but yeah.
Yeah, he would be the one name that's, super recognizable. I guess trying to blank on his name, Count Rugen.
Um, yeah,
He was reasonably well known, I think, at
yeah.
that time too.
Well, he had been in Spinal Tap at that point, which is where everybody would
Yeah.
recognize him from. Also, the lady who played Miracle Max's wife, and oh my God, I cannot remember her name.
Um,
Carol, Carol something.
yeah. Kane.
Carol Kane. She obviously was a an established actress at that point too. And I mean, and both of them just absolutely just there is not a performance in this film that you can point to and go, yeah, they didn't, they could have done better. I think
No,
everyone just nailed it.
absolutely. And, they nailed it for what it was. Like they took it
Yeah.
seriously enough. They
Yes.
played it straight,
But had
but they
fun.
weren't serious characters. They were
Mm,
fun. Like that, and they all had great chemistry together.
yes.
Like there's a lot of characters in this movie that don't spend a lot of time with other characters in this movie, but the time that they do share together is magic.
The albino in the laboratory. Oh my God. He is so funny. Maybe I shouldn't have jogged his memory so hard. I still greet my wife on occasion with "Hello, lady." Uh Andre the Giant isn't just. I mean, he's an absolute gem. I wish he had been in more movies. It was here's a funny sort of. It's almost a blooper. There's a one scene sort of towards the end where they're riding away on horses, right? And they show Andre the Giant on a horse, and is like, it's not Andre the Giant. You
Mhm.
know that's not Andre the Giant. He's dressed up like Andre the Giant. He's got his arms pumped out to make himself look bigger. But I mean, Andre the Giant is a giant. He's not riding a horse. Can you imagine him trying to ride a horse? I don't think they make a horse big enough.
I think I've said it before. Sorry, I'm off on a bit of a tangent here. We talk about
Left
D&D and
turn.
D and tabletop a lot. If you're running a D&D game, regardless of whether it's crunchy or whether there's a lot of role play, this movie is what your D&D game should feel like. The way the characters interact with each other, they're interesting without being too crazy deep. It's
Yeah,
easy to digest. There's
lots of quips.
contrasts, there's quips, there's fun, but there's contrast between the characters. Everybody has a part to play. Everybody gets their time to shine, and yeah, the emphasis on fun. The story is simple. Like the story within the story, the actual fantasy part of it, the Princess Bride. It's a very very simple story.
As stories should be.
Hmm.
I mean, all of the complications shouldn't come from the central premise of the plot. I talk about John Wick a lot, and I think John Wick has the absolute perfect plot. You killed my dog. I'm coming for you. I'm going to go through everyone who's between you and me. That's it. That's all you need. Motivations are clear. Everything else is just details.
Hello, my name is John Wick. You killed my dog. Prepare to
Prepare
die.
to die. Yeah. Somebody make a meme. Do it.
I'm sure it's been done a million times.
Well, let's find out. That's uh, John Wick Princess Bride. If it hasn't been done, I claim copyright.
I'm
Yeah,
sure it's been done.
it's been done a million times.
So let's explore that. If you were to run a one shot or build a small D&D campaign in the world of the Princess Bride,
Oh.
how would you go about doing it?
There's I don't know. See, here's the thing is where the trap is that I really want if I'm running some kind of a campaign, I want it chock full of member berries.
Hmm?
Right, which in this context I think might work. If you're running a one shot, I think it could work. If you're trying to run a campaign there, I don't think it could. But I mean, you'd want to hit the fire swamp. You'd want to have at least a cameo by Count Rugen, uh, which would be difficult because he's dead. Um,
I think you could do it like you talked about in your campaign that what we're going to be doing with our group playing pre-made characters.
hmm?
I think there's an interesting game to be had playing
Oh,
Vicini, Inigo,
oh,
Fezzik as pre-made characters through random shit before meeting the Man in Black.
oh. It would be interesting to do an alternate history as well, where you put the characters uh, as Vicini, and I don't know, maybe you throw Princess Buttercup in there as well if you want a fourth.
Hmm.
And they start out kidnapping her, and then she decides, you know what, I just need to run away. The Man in Black actually turns out to be the bad guy.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's a couple of different ways that you could do it, but I think that you would very quickly go off tone.
Oh, for sure.
Just because, like, it is so. I mean, the princess's name is Buttercup for goodness sake. Like, it's so sunshine and lollipops that it would be really really hard to continue a D&D situation with that. Cuz almost immediately someone is going to go murder hobo, and then it's like,
Oh
well,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, like it would have to be a one shot or very, very short mini campaign where the setup is simple. You know, you're Vicini, play Vicini. Like, okay, here's the roster of characters. Pick the one you want to play
yep.
and then try and play it.
Mhm.
Because that's the amazing thing about the characters is there's even just trying to play them would be fun. Imagine
Yeah.
just trying to be Fezzik, you know? Like,
Anybody want a peanut?
yeah. Like for a 4 hour session or a 5 hour session, like that'd be fantastic.
It would be fun. It would be sort of interesting to sort of give people the challenge of, like, here's 7 quotes that you have to find a way to work in, because it's a very quotable movie.
Oh, this is the most quotable movie.
I'm not sure that I would give it most, but it definitely is
It's up
one
there
of the
with like
ones.
some Monty Python stuff. Like it's at
Office
that level.
Space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely one of the most quotable movies for sure. I mean, I quote it nearly daily. Uh, yeah, there could be some interesting fun to be had by. I don't know. See, I've come sort of almost in a semicircle over the years about role playing, like in a tabletop setting and what that means. Because at one point it was like, for me, I was like, I started off like being a super crunchy character. It's like I need to figure out like what is the most um, optimal character. Like I need to squeeze the most out of every dice roll. And I've sort of come around to, do I really though? Like, do I really? Like, what is winning in this game? Oh, which reminds me, I got a link from a friend the other day. Speaking of tabletop stuff, of a BBC sort of piece about Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s.
Ooh,
And it was reasonably, like, it was actually f- reasonable and kind of balanced. Like, it was 100% wrong in every possible way that it could be.
was it like Satanic Panic influence type stuff,
No.
or okay?
No. It was a report on, hey, here's this game that's sweeping the nation, and it's a fantasy game, and it's like this and like that and blah blah blah. So almost like they got their sort of basic facts right. And they weren't, it wasn't a hit piece by any means. It was just very much like, imagine your mother-in-law trying to describe you playing a video game. That's what it was like. It was like an alien describing human civilization. It's like, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm going to talk about it for 15 minutes.
It's like portraying hacking in movies and TV.
Very much like that, yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, this is evil. It was like, here's a thing that people are doing, and we don't get it. It was interesting to see though that even in the 80s, like the tables that they were showing, and I mean it's in the UK, so it's like people sitting in a tiny, tiny sitting room around like an ottoman that has like some graph paper on it. Uh, Most of the players were in their 30s. It was interesting because it was always in my mind, especially at that time, it was like, this is a kid's game, right? Not so much anymore. Like, here we are playing Dungeons and Dragons into our 40s.
400s. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to play Gandalf without any actual makeup here shortly. Just got to put on a floppy hat. Ah, sorry,
So
that was a little bit left turnish.
no, that's totally fine. We're left turn the podcast. Getting back to the Princess Bride, I'm painting a mental image. You're home by yourself. You're in the
Do
kitchen
I have
cooking, maybe, or you're just,
do I have pants on?
completely optional.
Oh,
You're in the kitchen cooking, or maybe you're doing some dishes, and you're quoting this movie to yourself. What scene are you doing?
ah. See, I probably could have. Yeah, any one of 1,000.
Hmm.
Um, eh, the one that springs to mind first is the conversation that Wesley and Buttercup have in the fire swamp. Now that we're here, it's actually quite lovely. Well, I'm not saying I'd build a summer home here, but
Yes,
the
but the
trees in a
trees are
certain
actually quite
light,
lovely. Yeah.
yeah. Just there's so many understated things like that. Uh,
Yeah, the humor is not overt. Like
it's
it's
not.
it's obvious that they're not being serious, but it isn't slapping you in the face with this is the thing that you're supposed to laugh at.
There's no jokes. Oh, Chris Sarandon's uh when torturing he's torturing Wesley, and it's like, remember, it's for posterity. So be honest.
Yeah. I think the one I probably quote to myself back and forth just because I can go back and forth between characters is the um Wesley Humperdinck scene at the end, the to the pain.
Mm, yes. No, your ears you keep, so that you hear the screams and cries of all of the
The
people.
woman that
What
cries
is
out.
that thing?
Yeah. That is what to the pain means. It means I leave you in anguish, wallowing in misery forever. I think you're bluffing. I could be bluffing, pig.
The delivery on those is so perfect.
It is so perfect. Yes, the
Ah,
rest of the movie is infinitely quotable. There's a lot of things, obviously, that come up in specific contexts.
Yes.
You know, you fell victim to one of the classic blunders.
Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
Uh,
Wallace Shawn is my hero.
he was not in enough stuff, and I know that like you're basically when you're that type of person, like physically, you know, on
Yeah.
screen, you're kind of a caricature. So I imagine it's hard for him to get roles where he isn't basically playing a Vicini type character. I think I've seen him in a couple of things, maybe.
Yeah.
He's done a fair bit of voice work, and it's a
Yes,
great voice.
he has a great voice. I mean, he's a very talented actor. I mean, I think he's passed away now. Uh, but I mean, like his talent is on display to see. He's very, very good. The unfortunate thing is that film is a very visible medium, and if you're not, 6 feet tall, 8% body fat, chiseled jawline, straight nose, full head of hair.
I mean, that's the only reason I'm not a famous, you know, actor. The only
Well,
reason.
I mean, I had my time on the casting couch. I guess I wasn't good enough.
Well,
Yeah. There's a tradition that's dying, thank God.
all right. Any last things you want to say about the Princess Bride before we move on?
It's my favorite movie. I wanted to be the Man in Black more than any other superhero in my youth. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you don't like it, I don't like you.
Yeah. Watch it with an open mind and an open heart.
Hmm.
Yeah. This isn't like going back and watching Die Hard where you're like, "Oh yeah, this is a dated movie, but it like, you know, whatever, it holds up." This is probably more akin to going back and watching something like The Sound of Music in terms of an experience, or going back and watching Gone with the Wind, or The Wizard of Oz, right? Like
A
it isn't
different
as
era.
old as those. It isn't the same era, but the experience of what it is relative to the expectations of what makes a movie today, um it's very different. Maybe you want to ease into it and work your way backwards. There's a couple movies that I would recommend if you're fans of this movie. Um, One of them is the D&D movie that actually just came out this year. Now it's a more modern in expectation. There's no, well, I guess there's kind of a sky beam, and there's sort of the typical sort of action where everything's happening at once. You won't get this in a movie, but the movie had the same kind of heart that a movie like The Princess Bride would have.
Yes.
Another movie which Tanya and I love it. I've never hear anybody talking about ever is I would have called it newer, but it's actually 2007, so it's almost 20 now. Stardust?
I don't think I've seen it.
Really?
Think so.
Well, that's your homework then. Um,
Send me some text because I won't remember it.
yeah, it is not The Princess Bride, but it is another movie that, like The Princess Bride, is just one of those movies where it's just like, this is delightful. And I
We
think
need
that's the
more
best way
movies
to
like that.
describe it. Just unabashedly, unapologetically, charmingly delightful. And that's all it's trying to be. And that for me is more than enough.
Yeah. So here's a movie for you to put on your radar. Hudson Hawk.
You've talked about it before, and
Yeah. It's a terrible movie, but it is just fun from beginning to end.
I
It,
want to
it,
say I think Tanya's watched it. I think I've
it's
heard her
it's
talk about it before.
it's vastly underrated. I mean, it was an absolute flop in the theaters. Um, but it's a movie. You know how in a lot of movies, especially lower budget movies or ones where they're a little bit unsuccessful, there's one character who's absolutely chewing the scenery.
Hmm.
there's no one in this movie who isn't chewing the scenery. It's that
Perfect.
kind of movie, and everybody's just having a blast. And it's a Bruce Willis movie, so it's hard to go wrong.
There you go. Hey, do you want to hear what Ian has to say?
Yes, haven't heard from him in a while.
You've got mail.
I think this is going to bring the end to the positivity of this part of the show because I think the way I look at this question, it's going to get depressing.
Uh-oh.
The title for this question is called Influence. I saw this question on Reddit a while back and it got me thinking what you two would say. You are able to utter a single phrase and have that phrase be heard by all living humans simultaneously. Language barriers aren't an issue and translation is done on the fly. What would you say?
Kind to yourself.
We live in a world where people only listen to the things that they already want to hear. So I'm going to break the rules here, Ian.
Oh,
The We already know there's some shenanigans going on by the fact that it's being automatically translated and everybody in the world can hear me. So if I want this message to have any effect, I'm going to use that fact for people to think that this message is coming from on high. Because otherwise, like, whatever, nobody's going to listen to it. I'm not going to achieve anything by it. So if I can play God in one phrase and hope that somebody will listen to what I have to say, what would I say? How would I go about it? Now, you've got what you said, which is, be kind, but like, everybody's told to be kind every day and nobody listens. So I think I would have to go the other way. Make people feel like they're being judged from on high. And there's a line. I mean, it's been used in a lot of things. Hell, I think it's probably Shakespeare that originated from. In another delightful movie, which if you guys haven't watched it, it's one of Heath Ledger's early movies, A Knight's Tale. Another just sort of silly, fun, delightful movie. Uh, the antagonist character says in the movie several times, and then of course it comes full circle at the end. You've been weighed, you've been measured, and you've been found wanting. If I could deliver that message and make people think it was coming from on high, that God was judging them.
lots of people already think that though, and they just don't care. Here's my counterpoint to that is that all of the people that ideally their behavior would change already don't, they don't care what what the judgment is, right? Like they're betting that there is no judgment at the end of the race.
Well, and that's what I'm hoping that the shenanigans here with the setup of this question would make people think, oh shit, maybe I'm wrong about that. Eternal damnation and 9 circles of hell. Maybe that's in my future unless I turn things around.
Maybe.
And short of saying you done fucked up,
Well, I
like
mean,
that's you
yeah.
just hope
Here's
that they scramble to try and do better in what little
well,
time they've got left.
to turn it around and turn it into a little bit of a bit, I think, following the same vein, I would say, stop touching yourself so much.
That was like episode 1 or episode 2, wasn't
Yeah,
it? Where that came up.
yeah,
Why
I
are
think
you so
so.
interested in how much I masturbate?
it's 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 a question, you know.
Hmm.
No,
That's where I accuse the Bible of being fan fiction. Remember when we
Yeah.
were controversial, like
Oh
3 months
yeah.
ago?
Yeah. Back in the history, the long and storied history of our podcast, going back almost what, 3, 4 months now.
I think we started in April, so yeah, it's actually been
Wow.
quite a while.
We've
This
lasted longer than I thought.
episode 23, baby. We're like half a year.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Who would have thought we'd come so far?
So thanks for your question, Ian. You've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting. If you would
Yeah.
like to submit your question for judgment, hit us up by email. podbag@nerdingundertheinfluence.com. I would love to tell you how you're wrong. Or right.
Or just generally stumble over pronouncing your name.
There's that too.
I mean, there's so much of that as I can't even imagine. Can you imagine being on a like a live TV show or something? It's like, okay, we're gonna read out some reader mail, and it's like someone from a different culture, and their name has like 27 letters in it, and most of them are X. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Right. Or
You're
watching people read out like their Patreon subscribers or whatever on a YouTube or a podcast or something. It's like these are names that were never intended to be said out loud. Like Saggedy Wet Nipply Tits 69 420. Like that's not supposed to be read out loud.
one of the channels that I recommended in parting gifts a few weeks ago has just the best. Like they're not the typical stuff you would expect from like patron names, but where they're reading out usernames and it's just spinning three plates and there's like Charles the First, Charles the Second, Charles the First again. It's Mo. It's great. Speaking of parting gifts, I have one before we shut things down for the week.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Anybody want a peanut?
Watch The Princess Bride. Actually, if you've already watched The Princess Bride, then there is something that was released during the pandemic, during shutdown, for the hell was the name of that service that lasted like 3 months? Quibi,
Oh, are they gone?
Quibi, whatever that was. It was like short videos. It was all done in like portrait mode.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, a bunch of Hollywood people got together. You will never see something with more big name acting talent in it than home movie, The Princess Bride. Now, Quibi's gone, but you can find it all on YouTube. It's just a whole bunch of shorts that are strung together to completely reenact The Princess Bride. And when I say like big actors, I mean huge actors, all of them. You get to see Adam Sandler playing Columbo, Peter Falk's character, the grandpa. And he has never acted so hard and put as much effort into like sincerely portraying a character well in any movie he's done in the last 25 years. Everybody.
That's a low bar.
It is a low bar, but it illustrates the point that I want to make with this is that The Princess Bride is not just a cult film. All of the stars that you love, whether it's guys like Adam Sandler to Pedro Pascal to you name it, they're probably in this. And you can see just how passionate they are about recreating this material faithfully, lovingly. Probably don't watch it if you haven't watched the actual movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my takeaway, if you haven't seen The Princess Bride, go watch it. After you're done watching it, or if you've already watched it, just do a quick search on YouTube for The Princess Bride home movie, you'll probably find some playlists or a couple of rando videos with a few million views where they've strung them all together so that you don't have to find, 20 parts or however many parts there was in this. It puts a smile on my face.
It's about family.
It's about something. Well, man, it's good talking to you. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Lot of beer.